Welcome to episode 106 of Project Geekology. And the force is really strong with this episode because not only is it 106, but we are covering episode 6 of Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And to do that, joining me as always is...
Dakota. You didn't say your own name. What's your name, dude?
I forgot at the beginning of, I forgot my name in that moment. But this is Anthony. And joining us, Anthony and Dakota, for a good little while now is...
Rich. Happy to be on, guys. Thanks for having me again. Really excited. As you guys can see, I do have the Return of the Jedi Death Star behind me. It is, in fact, fully operational.
Every time I see it, I keep on thinking it's Battlestar.
For those of you listening at home or on your commute or wherever you listen to us, Rich has it's not a wallpaper. They're like wall stickers.
Giant stickers that we put it on over a black wall.
It's very cool.
Yeah, like fat heads, right?
Legit.
Yep, fat heads.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the exact terminology. Excuse me.
Wow, Dakota.
Wow.
Seriously, man.
What am I doing?
And you call yourself a nerd or a geek?
I feel like a loser now. Guys, we're covering Return of the Jedi, the 6th episode in the Star Wars saga, the third film to ever have been released, directed by Richard Marquand. We have a lot of thoughts as to what we like and dislike about this movie, and we're going to get into all of that very shortly. But before we get into any of that, let's talk a little bit about what we've been up to this past week. Rich, you were mentioning a couple things off the podcast before we started. What, you want to reiterate that?
Oh, since we went so in depth before, I didn't think we'd talk about it again, but I guess I'll rehash
We need like a diluted version, like a cliff notes of like what you're doing, yeah.
So I like to reward myself as a teacher. So after we came back from winter recess, we started to watch Revenge of the Sith. It is part of my larger Macbeth unit where we follow a tragic hero. So I thought we'd start it off with Anakin, and then we kick it over to Macbeth. So it's a great way to come back from break, and one of the few units of the year that I create an extensive PowerPoint for, because I struggle with what information they need before going into the movie. So it's been rather exciting times.
But that's actually very cool. I would have loved that if I were a kid in your classroom. Sadly, I wasn't. But I do like that concept of using Revenge of the Sith to ease your kids into Shakespeare. Because I do believe that the prequel trilogy is the closest we have in, I guess, big franchise media to like a Shakespearean drama today. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think we kind of got into like a very anti-hero, like you can't say like Tony Soprano or, I mean, I guess maybe Walter White, but even then I still think that a lot of these kind of new, the anti-heroes don't really kind of fall into that tragic hero genre as well. And we kind of really have embraced the anti-hero for like the last, I don't know, 20-something years at least, I think, in cinema and TV.
Yeah. What else have you been up to outside of Revenge of the Sith?
Keeping going with Dragon Age, Veilguard. I think I'm near the end. It's actually getting to the point where my wife is actually enjoying she won't admit this out loud, but she's come in and normally she tells me, it's time to end it. Let's go watch a show. But
she hovers.
Now she's sitting down and she's been kind of, she actually corrected me because one of the characters said something like, we're going to go fight this dragon. It'll be your first time. I was like, it's not my first time fighting a dragon. I already fought 2. And then my wife goes, didn't you listen to what she said? She said those other dragons were controlled by gods. This one's not. And I was like, oh, wow, she's paying close attention. So,
snap.
What have you been up?
And she knows Sonic's name.
Well, yes.
What have I been up to? Not a whole lot. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty lame this week. I didn't get a lot done. Just a lot of stuff around the house and the new house, as well as trying to just do random things. But yeah, nothing to write home about. Reread The Dawn of Yangchen for probably the 100th time because I'm trying to nail down this script. But yeah, Anthony, I'm gonna throw it over to you.
Wow, so quickly, Dakota. Wow.
I didn't really have anything. I'm trying to think. Like, I know I must have done something.
And Rich, you watched Revenge of the Sith, but that's not the movie we're covering. You watched the wrong one.
You know that you know what I did, Anthony. You know that I went and I watched Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Rogue One.
Oh, so you watched all of them to watch that one. Okay.
Yep.
So last week we were talking about, or I had said that I had started that show, The Wire. So I finished the first season. Now I'm like a couple episodes into the second season. That show is crazy, man. That show is crazy. And yeah, man, like it's one of those ones that you definitely need to like watch something else to balance you out, because there's a lot of like tragedy that does happen. But yeah, it's been good. I've been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals. Today, as of recording, which is Wednesday, January 8th, they actually started their new season of Marvel Rivals, and they dropped the Fantastic Four today. So we got like all of them.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
How do they play?
So, well, I haven't been able to play. I've been at work all day, so I haven't been able to play them yet, but...
Oh, so you're itching to get this recording done.
Yes, man. Like, we need to hurry up. Like, this is going to be like a 20-minute recording. No, but I've only seen some of Invisible Woman and Mr. Fantastic. I haven't seen any of the others, but Invisible Woman, I think she's like a strategist, which is like the support heroes. Like, she can make herself and like others like invisible, like kind of like putting out fields and stuff. I think that Mr. Fantastic is Vanguard, which is like the tank. So he's like a tanky character, which I guess like you could put him there. The Thing, I'm assuming, is also a Vanguard, and Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, is probably a duelist, which is like the DPS. And you know, I know that when I hop onto Marvel Rivals in true Marvel Rivals fashion, there's probably going to be the 4 to 5 DPS and then like 1 healer. So, or like 1 tank, 1 healer, and like 4 DPS. Oh my gosh, it's like, it reminds me of like the Wild West days of early Overwatch.
I can only imagine.
but yeah,
is Sue Storm basically like a Sombra?
No, you know who's closer to Sombra, believe it or not, is Psylocke.
Psylocke.
Yeah, Psylocke.
Apagando las luces.
Psylocke has like this ability that makes her go invisible. She also, I don't know, she's a lot more like fast pace, like moving. She has like this dash attack that kind of reminds me a little bit of Sombra's Translocator, which like in current day, like Sombra's Translocator is not something that you can put down and then like zap to later. It's like you throw it up into the air and then like you translocate in like a couple of seconds, or like, you know, or into like a room or somewhere, like in whatever direction you translocate, either on impact or like after a couple seconds. Yeah. So Psylocke is a little bit closer to her. I was wondering like how that dynamic was going to work, because I was like, okay, Psylocke is somebody that already goes invisible, and then obviously, you know, Sue Storm is literally named Invisible Woman, so we're going to have 2 invisible characters. And I mean, with Psylocke, it's not like Sombra, where Sombra's was like a long-term invisibility. Sombra, she's not at, or I'm trying to think of what her invisibility is like now. They've been like really just messing around with so many of the characters in Overwatch, and I think that Marvel Rivals is trying to learn from Overwatch. My only issue with Marvel Rivals is that they really need to polish it a little bit more. It does feel like an upscaled mobile game sometimes. I mean, it is created by NetEase, which that is what they're really mostly known for, so...
That's the vibe that I got from the couple matches that I played of Rivals, was that it's an unpolished Overwatch.
Right. And Paladins is a little bit like that too. But the thing is that I feel like Paladins fits in a weird space. Paladins is fun. There's nothing wrong with Paladins, but I feel like Paladins really is like the marriage of a MOBA game and a game like Overwatch, you know? So, I mean, they came out around the same time. But yeah, no, I've been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals. I do have fun with it, though. Like, even though it feels a little bit more unpolished than Overwatch, it is one of the better games that tries to fit the same bill, if that makes sense, you know? Like, I mean, there's a couple of games out there that are very similar to Overwatch, and this one holds more attention. I mean, I don't know how true it is. I haven't looked into the statistics of it, but I mean, so far, over a month. Yeah, like literally like a few days ago, it's been a month. They say that it's retained 90% of its players, so I mean, that's pretty good. And I mean, I hop onto it. I might play like a few matches every night. Sometimes I want to, you know, mindlessly play a game, so I'll hop onto like maybe an RPG, like, you know, you kind of grind out, or maybe even World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is it's a really good like podcast game that you don't really have to like invest too much into like cinematics or anything. I mean, if a cinematic pops up, I'll like pause whatever I'm listening, but you know how World of Warcraft is. Yep. So yeah, so like that's mostly really what I've been up to, you know, like gaming and watching The Wire. So
we'll be back after a quick break.
You like weird stories? You like bizarre accounts? You like horror movies?
Come on down to Pumpkin Hill Radio for all your paranormal, metaphysical, and high strangeness needs. Every Tuesday with host Travis, that's me, and Dawson.
It's me. You ever seen something you can't explain? You ever felt something you can't explain?
Do you have questions that nobody can answer?
You heard a story that made you feel completely mad?
Do you feel like you shouldn't Google what you just saw?
Have you tried to Google it and got nothing?
We might be able to help.
We're looking for it.
That's every Tuesday with host Travis and Dawson, Pumpkin Hill Radio. Come on down.
PHR, baby.
Pumpkin Hill Radio, available on all platforms. Anything else to say?
We'll see you there. Give it a follow. Tell your friends.
Very good. Guys, Han Solo's been trapped in carbonite for a year.
Yeah, man.
I think we need to take some time to really like let that sink in. I think that's enough time.
He was a rock.
Yeah, he was stuck on Jabba's wall for quite a bit. So I want to start this off with Rich, because you recently did a marathon of 7 of the movies, or 6 core movies, and Rogue One, a spinoff. How do you feel that changed or enhanced your viewing of this particular movie?
So for me, Return of the Jedi is probably always going to be, there's still a part of me that can go back to being 12, 13, whatever it was when I first saw it. Not when it came out, just to be clear. I'm not that old. I didn't see it till I was a little bit older.
You went to opening night.
Yeah, I went to opening night like 1 year before I was born or something like that. No, but I always loved it because, the Jedi win, right? I mean, in the end, Luke proves that he is right about his father. You got Ewoks. Look, I know some people against them. I love them. I do have a couple of comments about Ewoks overall.
Yeah, I was going to talk about those too. Yeah.
But I had a couple things I wanted to throw in there too. So let's all get our Ewok comments out of the way after Rich finishes his thought.
Yeah.
But, it's just, if you look at them in segments, right? If you look at them in threes, leaving out, obviously, Rogue One and Solo Story, the end of Revenge of the Sith isn't really a fun tone, right? And I didn't altogether have a problem with the sequels, but it wasn't the same as watching Return of the Jedi. That just hit different. Return of the Jedi is the one that sent me to the store to go buy 7 novels that day because I needed to know what happened next. And then, of course, all of that went away and got erased. But, Return of the Jedi always will be my favorite. I don't think it's even the best movie if I have to go with Revenge of the Sith, truly. I just think that, it's a masterpiece of just the way it works, except for the romantic scenes. But for me, Return of the Jedi just kind of, it actually hits on all cylinders. It may be a 12-year-old talking, but I absolutely love it.
Very good. Very good. I guess before we talk Ewoks, Anthony, what are your thoughts on Return of the Jedi, coming back to it?
It's always nice to go back and revisit the older films, the ones that started off this whole craze that has lasted for so long, and for me, while it might not be as strong as, say, Empire Strikes Back, it's tough because a lot of series don't knock it out of the park with the sequel, but this one did. The sequel overshadows the rest of the movies, but it still did a really good job in at least completing that portion of the story. Something had to be done with the information that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. That confrontation had to happen, and Han Solo, you just said you started off with him being in carbonite for a year, so that had to be addressed. And so for the most part, to me, I enjoyed it a lot. Aside from some of the gripes that people have about this film that just don't bother me as much. But yeah, it was nice to go back and watch Return of the Jedi. I think it's been a little while since I've watched it, so it was cool going back to it.
I'm in the same camp. It's been a bit since I've watched this movie. I know last podcast I said I had never seen it. This is the only one I hadn't seen, and I clearly freaked Rich out.
Trapped him.
But I Yeah, it was a trap. It's not true. I've seen it plenty of times. But it is a really fun film to revisit as an adult, because I do remember the feeling of being a kid and like before having to be in public school, like I was watching Star Wars literally every day. If you ask my mom, like I would just sit there with the VHSs of the original trilogy. And I think this one was the one I played most because it had all the weird aliens in it.
Yeah.
You know, it had the Salacious Crumbs, it had the Jabbas, it had the Bib Fortunas, it had that monk spider thing in the background, the Gamorrean guards, all of that. And I loved that, and it gives me so much joy to come back and revisit it. Obviously, some changes have happened since that version of the film. Yeah, but this film has such a really great kitschy vibe, I guess. You know, as opposed to some of the other ones, like there's a lot more levity in the on-screen jokes and like the visual cues that I think adds to the Star Wars dynamic and definitely adds to the playfulness of the prequels, which I always loved. So yeah, it's again not my favorite film, but it's definitely up there with, you know, as far as memories goes, and like returning to it feels great. I especially love the first half, specifically like before they leave Tatooine. I think that whole section of the film is just some of my favorite Star Wars. After that, Endor it kind of loses me a little bit. I just get bored, you know. But yeah, okay, let's talk about Ewoks, because, you know, speaking of Endor, we have these furry little guys that don't speak the common language of the galaxy. But yeah, what are your thoughts on... We'll start with Rich.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, I never watched it with closed captioning. I have never done that before, but because I'm showing Revenge of the Sith in class, my Disney Plus is just kind of...
It sets it
up, right? So I'm watching, like, you know, I watched a bunch of it today while I was grading and stuff. And first, I assumed that the Ewok language was Ewok, like, you know, Greek or Greece, right? I don't know. I thought it just stayed, I thought it would stay in the same form or something. And instead it's not. It's actually Ewokese, which is...
Oh, yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
Also, I don't know why, but Nia Nub, the Celestin, gets just pooped on because it says alien language. I'm like, what? Disney Plus? You couldn't change it to Celestin? Like, I don't understand, unless Nia Nub's speaking something else, but, you know, you would think they'd know.
I think with Nien Nunb, he actually is speaking a real language.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think it's Portuguese. What language?
I know
because I feel like their language kind of sounds like a real language. It really does. Like the other ones, you can tell like sound very much so alien, but that I always thought that one sounded... I was like, it sounds like he's speaking like a real language.
It's Kikuyu, which is a Kenyan language.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So when that was brought over to Kenya, apparently, everyone started dying laughing because this character's just randomly speaking in their language.
That's amazing. I do know that if you listen to Anakin talking to Watu in Attack of the Clones, he says Busco Shmi Skywalker. Like, it's actually a little bit of Spanish. So I always love that part.
Really?
Yeah, but I will try to keep us from diverging so much, and I will just try to go back to your original question about the Ewoks. One thing I don't understand is they seem to pick up basic very quickly, because at one point Han's like, back door, and he's like, yeah, and I'm just like, what? Like, how are they managed to pick it up so quickly that it's kind of confusing. And
they're actually diabolical geniuses.
Well, yeah, they can ride the speeder bikes. Like, they're able to like start the speeder bike up with no problem, get the handle going and everything. I thought they're pretty savage.
Create diversions and everything. Like,
but then they have heart, right? Like, there's that one where the walker shoots at two of them, and one of the Ewoks dies, but the other one doesn't know it, and he gets up and he grabs his arm like to go, and his friend's dead, and he like goes back.
I hate that scene.
And there's no word. There are no words, right? But it's so
you can understand it. Yeah.
So yeah, I know a lot of. I mean, I feel like I've read, or because I didn't really experience it. I didn't have like negative older folk around me who were like, oh no, here come the freaking Ewoks. But I have heard that some didn't love like the super Muppetization of this movie. But I actually. As my wife said before, she goes, you know, it's such a great... Well, first, she looked at Luke Skywalker when he's giving himself up to Vader and he's next to the stormtroopers. She goes, "What is he, a midget?" And I was like, well, actually, if in the first movie, Leia comments that he's a little short for a stormtrooper, and then she's like, between him and the Ewoks, little people got a lot of roles in this movie. So I thought that was a little strong, but I love everything about it. I actually think that Wicket the Ewok is played by, oh my god, Warwick Davis.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, so that's, he's kind of one of my favorite actors from many other films. So I love the Ewoks, man. Like they make me smile. The baby Ewoks are so cute. They're they're in their little nests, like getting scared. The party at the end. I love the Ewoks unabashedly.
Awesome. One thing that I noticed about the party at the end is that they have this really elaborate tree fort system in the redwoods of California, and they have fires going on everywhere. They have interior fires within that have been hollowed out from the trees. I'm like, how are you not setting up your entire camp ablaze? How do you manage? You're bumbling fools. Trip over everything. But you're also extremely ingenious in certain ways. The quickness that they're able to provide in terms of setting up traps for the ATSDs. It's amazing. How did the rebels communicate what they needed for the firepower that they were going to receive? And how did they so quickly, like you said, how did they understand basics so quickly? How did they manage that in such a short period of time? And I guess that's a little bit of suspension of disbelief there, but it is fun watching
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I don't hate it.
I feel, so what kind of gets me thinking is that I'm feeling that, it seems like the Empire has been established there for a while. There had to have been some dust-ups with the Ewoks and the Imperials. I'm pretty sure that the Imperials established themselves as an enemy there, and that's why the Ewoks were especially probably distrusting, okay, they're about the same height, maybe they're with them, but I guess when they show that they were friendly and they show that they're against them, then that's probably why they were able to kind of pick up that they wanted to fight against them. And who knows, maybe those traps were traps that they had set before because they've had these maybe they've had to defend themselves before. Because think about it, how has the Empire not eradicated these these Ewoks? That the Empire would definitely take out anybody that was messing with them or could potentially mess with them, and so they probably have had to defend themselves. But
especially creatures so close to where they're building,
dude, exactly, seriously. And so maybe that's how they knew where some of their stuff was, like you said, the suspension of disbelief. We're coming up with our own canon. But I agree. I know that one of the biggest issues with Ewoks is that it's this really cute creature and something that's supposed to be this really cool sci-fi opera thing. But it's dude, if you watch Star Wars, the silliness is just sprinkled all over the place, and I feel Ewoks really do have a place in the Star Wars universe. I mean, dude, at the end of the day, something that people need to remember is that the aim was mostly kids first, and they wanted to obviously incorporate stuff to make it all awesome for adults to watch too. And so they did it their job, kind of like Harry Potter. Dude, Harry Potter was aimed for kids but captured the hearts of adults too. They did the same thing with Star Wars. So the incorporation, as a kid, you love Ewoks, but I'm pretty sure some of the older edgelord geeks were nah, man, that's not Star Wars, that's that's for little kids, that kind of thing, but for me it's dude, there's a room for it everywhere. I had no issue with it,
and there was clearly an audience for it because they made 2 Ewoks,
dude. Exactly,
and a TV show. And
I remember seeing those movies long time ago.
I watched the first one recently for the first time.
Oh, really? No, I saw them as a
years
kid.
Ago. Yeah, a couple years ago.
They're like a fever dream to me.
They actually are.
Dakota watched them, and you're like, I'm probably gonna watch it and be like, wow, this is for the most part, I remembered like a lot of it, you know. But
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about something else. How are we feeling about like the main cast of characters, how they've evolved from who they were in the first movie, the princess, the scoundrel, and, you know, the boy with wanderlust in his eyes. How do we feel about, you know, now we have Leia's a rebel leader. Han is, well, he's frozen in carbonite at the beginning of this one, and and Luke is a full-blown Jedi, or almost a full-blown Jedi. He's not there quite yet. How do we feel about their transformation? Anthony, I'll start with you.
so yeah, according to Yoda, he was not ready yet.
He had to face his Jedi trial, and his Jedi trial was facing Vader.
Well, for Leia and Luke, that was like kind of like on track. Like it seemed like they were on track to be leaders within this rebellion. Han is definitely a 180 because Han did not want anything to do with that. He wanted to get his money and he wanted to go. But eventually he got to the point to where he became a general, you know? And similarly, Lando is like very much so like a Han type character. He's like, no, man, like he had his people in Cloud City, and I guess, you know, with that dust up that they had in Bespin, he got to the point where he became a general too. And so, yeah, you had this cast of, you know, semi-unlikely individuals that made their way up into the ranks pretty fast, because I'm pretty sure that there's people in that rebellion that probably were there from the beginning, but were probably just squad leaders, you know?
Which ends Hilly's.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But yeah, I see your point. I like that you brought up Lando as well, because yeah, he was a very like opportunistic dude.
Yeah.
And the first time that we saw him, you know, he was lovable, he had a lot of charisma, but ultimately he sold them out for the sake of his city.
Right,
you know?
right. And you know, yeah, he kind of went back on that. I like Billy D though, man. He kills that role.
He's perfect. I always loved Lando. Rich, what do you think about the characters and how they've grown over the years?
So I don't know why, but I felt like I was listening to Leia's voice. It's something about her voice sounds different in this one. I'm not sure if it's like she's indignant princess at the beginning, so she's a little like higher pitched, but her pitch comes off a little bit differently during this movie. I don't know if that's supposed to kind of indicate like a level of maturity. Just even her interaction with the Ewok at the beginning when she falls off the speeder bike, just kind of very calm and soothing, which I think is actually kind of different from the character that we saw in the other two movies. So I think they're trying to show a level of like just growth and maturity in her, as because she's always kind of been a leader, right? She was a senator, you know, she was kind of active, you know, under her father Bale, but she seems a little bit more mature in that way. Han, you know, like you said, does the 180, Anthony, in terms, but I love that he's in many ways like the comic relief in some, you know, as kind of being like the straight man into being like in absurd situations. And I really liked that. I liked his interaction with Leia, like when they're by the doors to the compound or what have you, when they're trying to take the shield down, and she pulls out the gun when he's, you know, held up from behind, and he just whispers "I love you" to her. So it's just like little moments like that I know that in some ways, like I think Harrison Ford said that he kind of by that point he really kind of he was kind of done with Star Wars a little bit, but I thought that his performance was great, and I love the character there. Luke, there's a seriousness to him that's definitely different. I mean, it makes sense at the after the end of Empire.
There's a definite like maturity level that he has attained, and he's very stoic in all of his proceedings. Like when he talks to Jabba, you know?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Very controlled, you know, like kind of the Jedi lack of emotion, right? Like he's kind of coming from a peaceful, calm place at all times. So I really enjoyed that. I know this is like a little nitpicky. I don't love his costuming in black. I mean, I think it's just Vader wears black and the Emperor wears black. So now we've got Luke wearing all black, you know, and I do like the ditching of the robes to an extent, right? I know that originally, I think, what did they say? Something like Lucas didn't want all the Jedi to be in robes. Like that was like Obi-Wan's thing, living as a hermit. And then they ended up putting everyone in the robes. So I do like that in this way he kind of departs from them. But of course, you know, years later, then does don his own robes as he is a hermit himself. So
right, you know, that's a really good point. I never really considered how his outfit change speaks to his Jedi hood, but he does have a hood in the beginning.
He does,
of the
yeah.
film. Up until pretty much he goes into the Rancor pit.
Well, I think he's wearing black, because he does have a little bit of Sith-like qualities. He does think in absolutes, he does, and he does threaten Jabba like, hey, do this or you're gonna die. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, this is a Jedi threatening, like he's using the threat of death on Jabba if he doesn't let them go. And so the thing that I like about that, and when you watch the prequels, it really like opens it up a lot. But the fact that Luke did have, a bit of a Jedi teacher, but there's a lot that he's also trying to figure out on his own. So he didn't grow up with that whole dogmatic, Sith would never, or Jedi would never negotiate with a threat or something like that. He has really no idea what a lot of the Jedi would do. So a lot of it is like, not giving into emotion and anger, which he does. So in a way, he kind of does tap into the dark side a little bit, but like he doesn't fall into it. So if at the end of the day, you could say that he's a gray Jedi.
You could say that, yes. What I will say, I was gonna joke earlier about how he doesn't have the sacred Jedi texts at this point. So like he doesn't have all of the knowledge of what came before. So technically, like right now, the actual throne room for Palpatine is the former Jedi temple. So like underneath the throne room is the ruins of that order. So it'd be interesting seeing that like explored one day and seeing more of those old Jedi artifacts come to life in Luke's era or past that point. But
yeah, that would be cool. And like we never get to see a Coruscant during that era. Like what is it? What is it like? I mean, it must be crazy Imperial, like so many Imperials going on. We
do get a Coruscant like viewpoint at the end of this movie.
Yeah, after when they're like celebrating the death of the Emperor.
I noticed for the first time today while I was rewatching this, if you look at the crowd of people celebrating in Coruscant, you could see them crowd surfing a stormtrooper.
Dude, I didn't even pay attention to that. I need to go back to that.
Yeah, it's actually really funny. Like I had to like, wait, are they actually? And it's like very blatantly like, yeah, I don't know if it's a dead stormtrooper or it's just
dude,
a stormtrooper.
Seriously, it's just a stormtrooper happy to be like out of the oppression. I mean, because we do get stormtroopers that don't agree 100% with what's going on. You do have defectors and whatnot. So who knows? Maybe he's like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
He's out of a job. He's like, well, you know what? I hated that guy anyways. And he's like crowd surfing. Dude, that's wild. I need to go back and look at that.
Yeah.
It sounds hilarious.
The first time I introduced my wife, Jen, or it was my girlfriend at the time, when I introduced her to the Star Wars movies, when we got to Return of the Jedi, when Luke showed up all in black, he was very stoic. Then it appears that he like force chokes the two Gamorrean guards, probably just shuts them up. I don't think it's supposed to be like he actually force chokes them and like causes them physical harm or anything. I think they're just freaked out. But because it looks like he force chokes them, it's supposed to, indicate that, oh, this is dark side Luke, like something happened and he's on the dark side now. And I never picked up on that as a kid because I was a kid. I'm not looking at the themes of like color, the color themes of Star Wars at the time. But so that's something that never crossed my mind until my wife brought it up. So it is interesting that you bring it up, Rich. And another thing you bring up that I thought was really funny. So Leia, you mentioned that her voice is significantly different in this as opposed to her voice in the first movie. And I think it's because she bounces between an American accent and a British accent throughout the movie, the original movie.
Interesting. Yeah, now that I think back to it. Yeah, because
I don't think there's like a canon reason for it because obviously Alderaan doesn't speak that way. But I think if I remember correctly, Carrie Fisher did answer the question as she was just making fun of Tarkin in those scenes.
Oh, that's amazing.
So in the scenes with Tarkin, which is a lot of them, she has a British accent.
I should have picked up your foul stench once I got aboard. Yeah. All right.
Or at least it's not British, but like more regal.
Yes,
it's
definitely more
more
regal.
proper.
She sounds
princessy.
Yeah, Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think in that moment she was playing that part too. Like, I mean, she is a princess, but also like under, they're suspecting that she was with the rebellion too, which she was, but she was trying to play it off. Which, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so I just think it's cool seeing these characters. It's now 4 years, like, chronologically from the events of the first movie. I guess it's still 3 years for Han because he was gone for a year. But seeing how they have each grown in their own unique ways is pretty cool. Let's talk about the whole Jabba's palace sequence, because that's for me my favorite part of the film. I love how it starts with, first it's the two droids showing up, unknowingly offering themselves up as gifts to Jabba in, like, the hopes that, Luke Skywalker can, like, make a peaceful bargain for Solo.
Well, we do know.
Obviously,
we do.
Oh, go ahead.
What I love is, though, that so clearly R2's in on it, right? He has to be, right? And I love that. Like, I love that even though C-3PO's a robot, right? He's like the guy you can't tell anything to. So R2 is able to know that this is happening. But poor C-3PO has got to be going through an emotional roller coaster because he's like, my master just, like, the guy. So his dad built me, right? He doesn't know that part, right? Because he got erased. But, this guy's been in in the Skywalker family for at least one generation. And he just gives him up, right? And, like, C-3PO kind of just has to deal with that. So I kind of love that.
Yeah, I like that. I do like that too. I like that R2's always just down. He doesn't care what the plan is. He's like, yeah, I'm up for it. Like, he just does it.
R2 locks in.
He does.
One thing I love about C-3PO in that scene is, there's a couple things, but one of my favorite lines is when, like, shortly after the message starts where, Luke is explaining, like, I'm giving you these droids, and then C-3PO, he has like this, like he turns and looks at looks at R2 and says, "You're playing the wrong message."
Yeah.
As if Luke Skywalker, like, had several messages that could have been relayed to Jabba.
Surely that couldn't be the one.
Of course not. But I think it's funny that, like, for a translator droid, like, that's his sole, like, as a protocol droid, his entire purpose is to translate for people. He's so terrible at, like, speaking other languages. Like, when he speaks Huttese, it's so clipped. Jabba no bata. Like, he's really struggling to, like, enunciate whatever he needs to say, but it gets across anyway somehow. I love that kind of stuff.
And the Ewokese.
I just picture him speak Spanish. It's like, "Hola, como están, mi amigos?" It's like a very terrible accent. It's like, if you compare him to an iPhone, at least R2-D2 has numerous uses, right? They have that socket everywhere in the universe. No, the Imperials really, whoever their engineers are, just really need to start putting covers on these things, but R2-D2 is like a Swiss Army knife, and then you got C-3PO here, who's just kind of the one-trick pony. I don't know.
Hey, R2-D2, he throws down, he fights. As we see in Revenge of the Sith. No, but yeah, I agree. Like, I just feel like even though R2-D2 he doesn't speak all, or he doesn't translate, he does have, like, more uses than C-3PO. One of the things that always, and this is something that you see throughout the series, is just how people understand what these astromechs are saying. Like, that always blew my mind. Like, it's literally just saying beeps and boops, but somehow you know what this thing is saying, and it's believable that they know what they're saying.
Yeah. One thing that I always, like, wanted to, like, explore is that, like, for some reason, in most science fiction or science fantasy, when there's a robot or an android or some sort of programmed life form, there's a reticence for the audience to, like, accept them as being a character in their own right, like, it's kind of off, like, oh, that's the robot. Where in Star Wars, droids occupy a sentient level that is far beyond most sci-fi series. Droids are characters unto themselves. Whether it's sentience or just, like, self-awareness, I think it's pretty cool that, like, we don't even question it. Like, droids are who they are. Like, that's just a different type of life form in this galaxy.
Right, so, it's like almost a different species, even though they're created.
Exactly.
Yeah, kind of like K2SO. like he's a droid, but there is that kind of like that self-awareness, kind of like with the C-3PO, there is that display of like fear. He obviously shows fear that he's going to be destroyed, So yeah, there is that self-awareness.
Another thing I want to talk about in Jabba's palace is that Jabba clearly knows something's afoot the moment the droids like show up. He knows this is going to end up as a trap. And then we have the Leia coming in with the Bosch helmet, and she has another one of Han Solo's close associates, which is Chewbacca. So now we have 2 droids. The next day we have Chewbacca, and we know that Luke Skywalker is coming. So he's like, I love that he kind of sets up a trap, just waiting for Han Solo to be awoken in carbonite, or from carbonite. And like he already knows it's coming. He knows that like this is the entire goal is to sneak him out. And he just makes it entertainment for himself. Like he just sets his little throne up behind a curtain, gets all his homies back there, and is like, watch this. We gotta probably wait until like 2 a.m., but just watch this.
No, yeah, for 2 a.m. You just hear that Jabba laugh.
You have to question his hiring practices, though, So we have an open position for Gamorrean guard. All right, who's next? Oh, hi. So are you Gamorrean? No, my name's Lando Calrissian. Sure, we'll hire you as a Gamorrean guard. We'll give you the same exact outfit, even though you look nothing like it's just none of the other guards are. I feel like almost all of them.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Are Gamorreans, and then you have good old Billy D. Williams. He might as well be slinging his Colt 45 there, and Jabba doesn't seem to notice one of the other more prominent. Nobody noticed there. Nobody. Lando.
He was a deep plant. Man. So
it was the long game.
Another thing that's really funny for me is clearly Jabba's parties go hard. Because regularly, like whenever it's nighttime, you'll just see like a bunch of sleeping individuals and like partiers just in his like general vicinity. Yeah, they just like collapse right then and there, right around his throne. I think that's hilarious.
What do you guys? So I think you kind of mentioned it before how there are some differences here, and we are in the Jabba's palace scene. So what are your thoughts on the musical stylings of Sny Noodles? I think that's the
Sice Noodles. Yeah. To be entirely honest, I've seen this version so much nowadays since 97, whenever it was released, that I don't even remember what like the original scene looked like in my head. I'm sure I would recognize it immediately if I saw it again. But as far as Sice Noodles goes, I love the design. I know that it's probably my wife's favorite Star Wars character is Sice Noodles. So when Sice Noodles showed up in Clone Wars, she was ecstatic. But yeah, I don't mind that. The other guy, I forget the other guy's name. The guy that's like the
Max Rebo.
No, Max Rebo's awesome.
The flute or clarinet player guy?
No, not him. The guy who sings like.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
The jazz singer, like the really like. I hate that. I hate that animation so much.
Oh, he looks like the Mucinex commercial.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Not that animation quality of a commercial.
And they tried to make it like really high tech, where like he got right up close to the camera and like spittle from like his like open mouth was kind of like flopping around in there, and it just looks terrible. It just looks like, please no.
Not a fan of that one. Yeah, I think I've seen the Nice Noodles enough that it is. I did own the VHSs that didn't have that, so but it's been such a long time. Obviously streaming is just kind of so much easier that I've seen that version so many times that, like you said, I don't even think I can remember, like, if you paid me all the money in the world, I don't think I could tell you exactly what filled that space beforehand.
Right.
But it does generally fit in the palace. And also, the casual death of the Twi'lek is, everyone just kind of carries on. They're like, oh yeah, this is kind of what normally happens. No, like, I love that they can sleep in the same place where, like, at any moment somebody can be dropped into the rancor pit. And the crying rancor
beautiful.
guard is, I mean, I don't know. It's like it's some of the most absurd / best acting ever, right? Like, he looks so upset. Like, that's my baby rancor. Like, what did you do to it?
He said,
what I will say, yeah, it does feel like totally. I don't know if it's unearned, like that single performance, because he acts his heart out. But like everyone else is just like in a kitschy movie, like
Yeah.
he just lost the pet that he's been raising his whole life. Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Yeah, I wonder if he was friends with Machete, who's also a Rancor trainer.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
In Book of Boba Fett.
That's right. I do love the skiff scene by the Great Pet of Sarlacc.
Yeah.
I think I love even Han being like blind is kind of hilarious, right? Like Boba Fett, where and the fact that he just accidentally hits the jetpack is like just gold.
Exactly, and the thing is that like, stuff like that happens in Star Wars. There is a bit of that like slapstick comedy, so like that's why with the existence of like something like Ewoks, it's like, why would something like that bother you? Because it's silly, dude. Star Wars is silly sometimes. So yeah, dude, like, and in the moment where Lando falls and like gets grabbed by one of the tentacles, and like,
oh yeah,
and like he's like trying to like shoot it, and like Lando's like, kind of like, aren't you still like kind of like, you're blind? He's like, no, I can see higher. Like that whole sequence, dude. It's like there's a crazy moment that's happening, but it's also comical at the same time. So yeah, dude, I just love a lot that happens in this movie. Like it may not be as strong as Empire, but like it still earns its own right to be called a Star Wars movie, And
we see Luke has a new lightsaber. It's the first time we're seeing a green colored lightsaber in one of these movies.
Yeah, so he's a sentinel pretty much.
Yeah, he's a sentinel. Let's jump over to his confrontation with his father, Vader, and them being egged on by Palpatine. Because I think that that's such a fascinating moment in Star Wars, because it is kind of like how you can be so easily tricked into the seduction of the dark side. You just let go of your anger and just like be ruled by it, And for a second, Luke does go into that mode where he nearly kills his father.
Yeah.
And then realizes, no, I'm not doing that.
Right. Like, it's like the pull of the dark side is kind of getting him there, but he catches himself like, no, I'm not going to take that deep dive, It really is, that moment really is, it's like a personal power struggle for Luke. The push and pull of the light and the dark happening like in him in that moment, like him wanting to save his father, but then also him wanting to protect Leia, because he makes that, like, he really makes like that deep jab, like, well, if you're not gonna fall to the dark side, maybe she will, so it is crazy. And dude, Ian, I mean, like, this is where like we really get him, and like he has really just killed that character.
It's amazing that we have had Ian McDiarmid like do that role since this movie. Like that was 1983. This was probably filmed in 82, and then Rise of Skywalker was 2019. It's a long time. So it's a really long time.
But he made that character his own. Like, he really did a great job. Like, he embodies that villain, and like he really, and then I mean,
he's deliciously evil.
He is. And like, even like when you go to like the prequels, like him like playing the double, like two sides of a coin is just brilliant. So like seeing that, like him, like where he started is, or going back to it, it's awesome. And his roles man.
Rich, what are your thoughts on that whole side of the film, specifically with Luke confronting Vader, almost being tempted by the dark side, and like Palpatine?
It's amazing. I think it's Dermid or something. It's got a little bit of an odd spelling. Yeah. He's just fantastic. I mean, it's also like just some of the word choice, right? Like at one point he switches to calling Luke his young apprentice, right? Like just these little like manipulative things that it's amazing, because I think that some of his most amazing villainy does not come from the dark side. It's just his ability to create sentences in a way, to deliver information in a way that slowly like ropes the individual into his seduction, right? That's a good
way to put it. Yeah.
He does it with Anakin. I was just thinking about how like he asks Anakin to spy on the Jedi Council. Then the Jedi Council asks Anakin to spy on Palpatine, and Anakin's like, "What? How? That's ridiculous!" But like, hey, Palpatine just asked you to do the same thing like a little while ago, And it's just his delivery, and in this sequence, it's equally the same. I mean, even Luke and Vader, when they choose to either say father or when he says my son, and then he just switches to Luke, to get it. It's almost like the son part is a little bit more aggressive, but then when he says Luke, he's kind of trying to appeal to him as a human. It's really masterful. And what's amazing about that whole sequence is, a very rudimentary set, right? The battle is so far that it's just like this tiny little speck in the window of the throne room there. And, it's just the scaffolding or whatever that's around the walkways that are there. But those three, I think, really just kind of use that space in such an amazing way. And gotta give him credit. I actually even think that the shaft that Palpatine gets thrown down, man, for that time, that's not bad. I actually think it looks pretty good, even just for if you're talking about it being remastered from back in the early 2000s, it still stands the test of time.
I generally find that the original effects that they went with just look so much better than the new ones that they tried to digitally include. Maybe save for the Hayden Christensen inclusion, which I actually, that is one change that I do enjoy. I think it could be better, but I enjoy that they did that.
Oh, and it kind of like makes sense because that was like kind of what he looked like when he was like aligned with the light side of the Force.
If I were Lucas and I were trying to put Hayden into this, I would have originally, I would have the original actor that they had as a Force ghost, but like kind of flickering a little bit into Hayden Christensen, because we know that Force ghosts, it's in later canon, it's kind of explored that Force ghosts don't stick to one time in their lives to portray, like their age varies greatly. So I think that could have been a cool way to introduce like that concept of like, this is what he looked like when he was a Jedi, basically.
Yeah, I did, like that scene where Vader, like you can tell, like even with the mask on, that he's like really wrestling with himself when Palpatine is hitting him with Luke with lightning, trying to kill him. And that little seed that was planted by Luke, of there's still good in you. It's like it kind of blossomed because, when he was Anakin, he was really excited about like having children with Padme. So like maybe those old feelings kind of like came back, and he's like, here's my son in front of me. We've, like in a messed up way, they kind of reconnected, and he's like, he's about to die. I can't let that happen.
Speaking of like, him eventually taking off the mask, I agree with you, Anthony. I think that like his acting even underneath, like with the mask on, is really impressive. Like being able to emote without your face is not something everyone is capable of. Yeah. So one thing that like we can kind of explore nowadays, because we've had several like TV shows that exist in this universe at this point, is the symbolism of how Luke was the only one to ever truly take the mask off of Vader. We had Ahsoka fighting Vader in Rebels, and she slashes his mask, and like one of his eyes is shown to the screen. It's like half his face, or like a little bit less than half of his face. And then in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, Kenobi was able to like take the other half of the mask off, but it was never a full mask that they were able to remove. And in both of those moments, there's clearly still good in him. Like there's something fighting from the inside to come out. But it's not until this movie where, Luke is actually capable of, just with love, was able to take off the mask for Vader. I think that's like just symbolically so cool.
He didn't want to fight. Like the amount of times that he tried to deflect the fight, that, despite everything, that Luke was showing that compassion towards Darth Vader. When in a world like when anybody would want to take Vader out, he's like the person that's the closest that would easily probably be able to, and he was in that moment where he could have ended it all, and he still decided not to do it. And I feel like that moment where Luke tosses his lightsaber, like, you know, I don't think like people realize like how powerful that is. Like, he's like, I'm not, you know, he could have easily just deactivated it and placed it, but he's like, he didn't even want to have it near him in that moment, you know?
It was almost a temptation to take a life.
Right.
Like he wasn't willing to, you know.
Right. When that disillusion that you genuinely feel when you're feeling a strong emotion kind of washes away, and like if you did something in that moment, it's that kind of like that realization. I mean, Anakin has that moment, you know, when he cuts off Mace Windu's hands and like, you know, Palpatine kills him. He kind of, that moment's like, you know, oh my god, like what have I done? You know, it's like Luke has, you know, that kind of like that same personality in a sense, but he's able to dial it back before it goes too far.
Let's talk a little bit about Yoda, because he's in it briefly, and it's a fairly important scene for the old master. Rich, how do you feel about 900-year-old Yoda?
Well, first, I love there's like a meme or whatever of like Yoda passing away, and it's compared to like parenting and having to listen to he's like, now I know how Yoda felt when your kid's talking to you for like 10 hours rambling on about something. You're just too tired and you just turn over and croak. I really liked it here. I was actually kind of marveling a little bit at the puppetry and just kind of how good it looks. You know, like I've been watching, you know, I've seen Revenge of the Sith 4 times today and yesterday, parts of it. So I've seen a lot of Yoda, CGI Yoda, and I just kind of liked seeing puppet Yoda. I thought it looked really great. It also leads into the great scene where Obi-Wan is a duplicitous lying guy and Luke calls him out on it. I kind of love. So the only thing that so what? So you say Han's been frozen in carbonite for a year, so slightly before that is when, you know, Yoda last saw Luke, and kind of just talking about how his training's complete, and I'm just like, wait, what? How?
It clearly wasn't complete last time he left.
Yeah, it's only been a year.
What happened?
He hasn't seen you. You know, obviously we don't know how much. I mean, even Vader later in the movie is like, Obi-Wan has trained you well. It's like, well, actually Obi-Wan hung out with Luke for a little bit, and then I understand some of the other control aspects of the Force that maybe even through being a Force ghost, Obi-Wan could have, shared with Luke to improve his skills. But like, did they do sword play too? Like, did he like as a ghost be like, 1 point, you know, like, that's the one thing that I don't, how did Luke increase his sword play being the only, like, does he have any boys who also have lightsabers? I mean, it's just, you know, I don't know if I needed more of a passage of time. Obviously, all of these questions are answered in some sort of, you know, comic or novel that, you know, that's out there.
They have. That's a great thing about Star Wars that, you know, I've mentioned a couple times on this podcast is if you don't like something or you don't get something about Star Wars, all you got to do is consume more Star Wars because they will answer it eventually. They will get to that particular
at some point,
issue that you have, you know.
You know, the thing about Yoda is that, you know, with as much like Yoda has been through so much, and nothing could kill him except for old age. It's crazy that he lasted 900 years. Like, it is insane, but he made it.
That is really cool. Yeah.
I mean, like, just like when you read through some of the High Republic stuff, like even at that point, he's hundreds of years old. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this dude is still really, really old, but at that point you're thinking he's younger, but he's still really old. It's wild. But
I love that line that he says to Luke, "When I die, the last of the Jedi you will be." I think that that's such a powerful moment for the film because at that point Luke is truly alone. He's lost all the mentor figures, even though he really hasn't because they just turn up as ghosts.
Yeah.
Right then and there. But it is just like a powerful moment, and you kind of have to wonder, like, what are they gonna do with like the Cal Kestises of the galaxy that are just still out there. Oh, and speaking of Cal Kestises, have you guys been watching Skeleton Crew?
Yep.
dude,
Cal Kestis is not in that, but we do have Jod, who is clearly a former Jedi. Anthony, are you caught up?
no, I'm not caught up. I need to. I'm like a couple episodes behind.
Okay, so I'm not gonna spoil anything there, but some major stuff has happened in the past couple episodes with Jod, and like I'm really starting to question, like, are you a good guy or what? Like, I have no idea with him.
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you. From the beginning, I have a theory that he actually may be a Sith.
Okay.
Like, because he continually says that he's not a Jedi. I mean, obviously he's a Force user, but like, you know, maybe he was like maybe a former Inquisitor or something. Like, you know, maybe he got away. You know, and I feel like a good, like, I mean, if you were gonna be a bad type of character anyway, why not go pirate? You know. So
Yeah. Well, I don't know that he could be ex-Sith or like maybe like an Inquisitor or something, or maybe just a Sith apprentice that never got anywhere.
yeah.
But he does have Jedi lines that he occasionally drops. Like a couple episodes ago, he said a quote from Qui-Gon where he says, "Your focus determines your reality." Like, that's very clearly a Qui-Gon centric quote. So I don't know. Like, I'm so lost about like who this guy is, because I think the finale's next week. They left us off on a huge cliffhanger. I'm not gonna spoil that for you, Anthony. And neither is Rich, right, Rich?
Hey, well, so keep it safe, keep it secret.
Good. But yeah, it's the mystery's there. I'm excited to see what they do with that.
So yeah, I gotta catch up. But yeah, man,
Is the season finale next week? Hold on, let me just double check that.
how many episodes are out? 6 or 7?
7.
All right, then yeah, it'll be next week. It's eight episodes. I think that it is a time to kind of close this out. Do we have any last minute things to say about Return of the Jedi, Rich?
Just top to bottom, I mean, you get to see our boy Admiral Ackbar. It's a trap. There's just
Quotable line.
You know, Nia Nub's woohoo celebration when they blow up. I really love all the characters. Chewbacca's hair looks great in this movie. Like, they figured it out. He's using some mousse or something. He's got some nice height to that hair. It doesn't look matted. It doesn't look frizzy. It's like they really perfected the Chewbacca look, I think, in Return of the Jedi. Just
He started to comb.
Yeah, I mean, you get the Boba Fett into the pit of Sarlacc. Like there's so many parts of this that so many characters. Golden, yeah. I love so much of this, and yeah, it may not be. I guess if you're taking it as a stand-alone movie, it's not the best one, but I don't know how you can watch it and not just kind of be happy at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and that final like tune that's playing.
Oh man,
where it's just like heartwarming. Like finally the galaxy is free of oppression.
And using
for now
stormtrooper
as far
helmets
as we know.
As a drum,
yes.
Right? How nice is that?
Right.
The Ewoks are like, hey, let's cannibalize these guys' armor and use it as musical instruments to forever remember that we defeated and killed them.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. But I tend to really enjoy this movie for the most part. I understand its flaws. I understand that it suffers from like verisimilitude issues, which is kind of like, would this actually happen like in the real world of Star Wars? And there's certain like things within it that are kind of like corny and whatever. So I can understand people's issues there. But overall, I really enjoy it. The speeder bike chase is so cool. Like, the sound effect design was top notch, especially in that. Let's see. Yeah, there's so much in this movie that I really enjoy, like certain team ups, like getting Lando in the Falcon. I love that. Just there's a lot to love about this movie, and there's a lot to be critical of, but I'd rather not be overly critical.
No, I agree. I think that this is a really good like closeout for that original trilogy. I feel like they, like you said, it's not a perfect film, but I mean, none of the Star Wars films are really like inherently perfect, but they are charming in their own right. And that's what this movie is. It's got its charm. It also has its fun zaniness to it, and it is a fun watch. And it very much so. It's not one of those movies that leaves you off with a cliffhanger. There's some like movies that kind of leave you with like more questions by the end, and like this one kind of, it's like, okay, this has happened, the Empire's defeated, the galaxy is, it's in peace. They could have ended it at that point and we would have been none the wiser. They didn't have to add any more of the films, maybe the prequels, but other than that, like they could have that could have been it. And so yeah, no, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, what I always think about this movie is that it broke the third film curse, where a lot of times third film trilogies are the worst. You know, you think of the Matrix trilogy, the Mummy trilogy, Jaws, Superman. There's a bunch of third movies out there that are just absolute trash compared to the other ones in the series. And I'm just scratching the surface there, but with Star Wars and then later Indiana Jones, they really cracked the code with those particular movies in ways that just heighten the adventure and the joy of the viewer fan base. So I'm really happy about that. Guys, should we stick in the Star Wars realm for our next episode?
Aye, aye, Captain.
What did you want to do?
Did you want to split Skeleton Crew up into 2 parts? Because I think the finale's next week, so it's prime time.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah. Go from old to a new Star Wars thing. That'd be cool.
I ain't ever heard of no Skeleton Crew.
I ain't never heard of no Atten. I love that. I love this show so much. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to us here for episode 106 of Project Geekology. It was really fun talking about Return of the Jedi. Next week, we're going to be covering the first 4 episodes of Skeleton Crew Season 1. We're extremely excited to finally dig deep into that. We've been kind of discussing it
in circles,
since the past couple weeks. But now we're actually going to, like a Knights of the Round Table sort of we need to talk about this. So, yeah, episode 107. Listen to us here, wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you would like to check out any of our socials, be sure to click into the show notes down below. And we're going to need one of those 5-star reviews. Specifically, Anthony, what do we always say?
We need that juicy 5-star, man. That fresh fillet. Imagine that sizzle, as Dakota said a couple episodes ago, like at Chili's, you're hearing that sizzle, and it's got to be that juicy.
It's got to be that juicy, guys. All right. We'll talk to you next week, guys. Have a good one.
Bye, y'all.
May the Force be with you.
The Wolverine.